Okay, so I want to wrap up chapter 3 by showing you something. I've got the app installed on my phone and running, and you can see it right here. It's the green little Android icon. And the reason why it's that is because when you create a new project in Android, you automatically it creates the program icon for you, and it defaults to this little green Android guy. So I'm pretty sure later in the course we'll create our own icon, but anyways, what I want to show you is now some of you might be wondering why when we pulled up our app in the chooser, when we launched our intent and we got the chooser application, which showed all of the other applications that knew how to handle that intent, why our receive message activity didn't show up. And that's because we didn't have it registered with intent filters to qualify for certain kinds of intents. So I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. The book doesn't do this, but I want you to know how to do it. And so this is really about intent resolution and intent filters. The book mentions those. So what I'm doing here is I've got my app running, and I'm going to press the button, and that's going to launch an intent. And then the Android operating system is going to go and look through the manifest file for every single app that's installed on the phone, and it's going to look for intent filters that match this intent. Oops, let me pull my phone back up here. So I'll go ahead and do that right now. And you can see here that now, unlike what we had before, my receive message activity is eligible to handle this intent. Now that's a little bit different than what we were seeing when you just finished the project for chapter 3. So I'll just go ahead and choose that here. And you can see that there's the text that I had entered in the previous activity. And so what I want to do is I'm going to switch over to Android Studio, and I'll show you there's only 2 changes that I had to make that receive message activity show up in the chooser. So I'll switch over to Android Studio, and we'll talk about that in just a second here. So I'm looking at the manifest file for my Messenger project. I actually called mine Messenger 2 because I had already created another version of it, but yours will be called Messenger. And you already know that when you add a new activity to your application, you have to register it in the manifest file. And that's what's going on here. Now, so you should have, I'm going to show you what you'll have here. I added this, but I'll take that out. So this is what you should have right here. And what I did is I added an intent filter to this activity. So we're actually inside the activity tag. This is the activity tag for the receive message activity, the one that handles the intent and displays the data from the intent. So the first thing I did was I added an intent filter to this activity. I registered an intent filter for this activity. So what this is saying here, let's go through this really quickly. Now the book points this out, but I want to show you this middle line here where it says category and then Android name. That's required for implicit intents. So you should know the difference between an implicit and explicit intent. And just to review that really quickly, an explicit intent is where you launch an intent and you specify the activity that you want to handle the intent. So you're specifically saying this intent is for this activity. But when you launch an implicit intent, you're telling the Android operating system that go out there and find any application, any activities in any application that knows how to handle this type of intent. So that's what this category is right here. You're saying, first of all, you have to have this category right here. I'm sorry, right there. That makes this activity eligible for implicit intents. And once we do that, we have to specify the type of intent that this activity knows how to handle. So the type of intent in this case is a send intent, but I think in some ways I think that calling it a share would be more intuitive, because usually when we share something, it launches a send intent. So this is the type of intent that we're launching, or this is the type of intent that we're listening for, rather. for this activity. And then finally, this third piece of data is the data type that's in that intent. So we just passed plain text around. So maybe if my intent was sharing an image or something like that, then this activity, the receive message activity, would not be eligible for that because the data type is different. So if you were trying to share an image and you pulled up that chooser, then the receive message activity wouldn't show up in the list because the data type is different. Even though it's still a share or a send intent, the data type has to match as well. So just to review the process again, now the button gets clicked, and that button is in the create message activity over here. When that button gets clicked, we launch the intent, and when I say launch it, what I mean is we call this method right here, which is start activity. So that's what I mean when I say we launch the intent. We're actually just calling start activity. We configure the intent in these 3 lines up above here, and then we launch it by passing it to the start activity method. Then at that point, the Android operating system looks at the intent. It sees that it's a send intent right here. That's the type of intent it is. It sees that the data type is text right here, and then it starts going through all the manifest files for all the applications installed on the phone, and it starts looking for intent filters that match this intent. So again, I'm going to go back over to the manifest file. So it will come across this intent filter right here, which matches that intent, and this intent filter belongs to the receive message activity, so that makes it eligible to handle that intent. So that's why the receive message activity is appearing now in the chooser. So now that's all it takes to get the receive message activity to appear in the chooser, but there's one more slight little change you have to do to the code in receive message activity to actually make it display the text that we pass along with the intent. So remember that when we stuff information into an intent, we actually stuff it into the extra object. We put it in there as key value pairs. So what that extra object is, it's basically a hash map. So I'm hoping you're familiar with hash maps. They're arrays where the index or the key is actually a string rather than a number. So maybe we'll need to do some Java review there. But by doing that, by adding information and giving it a key, we know how to get that information out in the receiving activity. So in this case, what we did is we're getting a string extra out of the intent, and we pass in the key so that we know which string to get out of the intent. So in this case, we made our own key here, and this is just a static variable of this receive message activity class. So, but the change that I wanted to make is, now this is our own key here that we made up, but once we changed, when we wanted to make the chooser show up, we changed the intent over here, and we didn't really go back to the receive message activity class. We just left it alone. It just didn't come into play after we changed this intent so that we could get the chooser to show up. So activities, when they handle this type of intent, this send intent with text, in most cases they're going to look for a key that's common to the Android operating system. So we're going to use a key that's actually a static variable of the intent class, and it's called extra text. That way, all those other apps, they don't need to know about our special key that we made up on our own. We can just use a generic key that all other apps will probably use to look for the actual text that's inside the intent. So the change that I made, the other change other than the manifest file that I just showed you, was in the receive message activity class. And all I did was instead of looking for our own little key in it, I'm going to look for the one that we had changed to when we tried to use the chooser app. So all I did was so I commented out this line here, and I am now looking for the string with the key of intent dot extra text. So that's all I had to do. And what that'll do is that means that we'll get the right information out of the intent, and we'll be able to display it in our label down here. So this is a little bit of rigmarole because we've been mixing different stuff around as we experiment with the app. So I hope I'm not confusing you by doing this, but I want you to make those two changes. Change your manifest file, add the intent filter for the receive message activity, and then also go back over to the receive message activity and then just put this line of code in here in place of what you had before. So we're just changing the key that we're looking for so that we can get the right text out of the intent. All right, I'm going to stop talking now.